Hello everybody, my name is CulBlu and I'm bringing out this video of me talking about a board game, and today I'm going to be doing my review here of the Core Discovery. So I have a few things to say about this game, but first let me go ahead and get our background music started, because you know I like my background music there. There we go, get some nice peaceful Lotus Garden music. And as far as everything goes with this game, I will say that there's a few things to talk about right off the back. One, I'm going to try to get my review stuff first, and then I'll talk about how the game plays, and I'll talk about some extra stuff at the end. So essentially, I'm going to invert how I normally do my review structure here, because I do have a lot to say regarding the subject matter and the topics and everything, but I'll say that for the end. So for those who are watching, just to kind of see the review of the game, I think it's a solid game. I think it's pretty good. This is a deduction game where you're going through and you're trying to use your deductive skills to find out what's where, and you're trying to survive. And also achieve the challenges or complete the challenges that you're faced with, while also trying to achieve your overall goal. So I think it's a pretty solid game in the sense that it gives you a lot of variety. There's a lot of maps that it has with the base game, which gives you 20 different maps, and the maps are just different configurations. And the logic rules that they use between the two systems that are the two different, I guess, chapters is what you would call it. The two chapters that are in the base game for flora and fauna, those rule systems are unique and different from each other. So it feels like you're playing a kind of a slightly different game every time you if you go from chapter 1 to chapter 2, which chapter 1's fauna, chapter 2 is flora. I'm going to demonstrate or explain some of the rules here with the training scenario, and then I'm going to use that as a jumping off board to talk about the full game, and then I'll talk about some other stuff at the end. So overall, a great game. I think officially I would give it an 8 out of 10. And I also am a huge fan of the amount of variety that this game gives. Two things that I like and two things that I don't like. Thing number one that I like is that there's a lot of variety in the game. Thing number two that I like is that there's a nice crunchy puzzle with crisis that's involved. So you got a lot of variety, you got a lot of crisis that's there, and you got a lot of puzzle for yourself. And this game does reward kind of critical reasoning with what you're doing and where you're doing it at. That's pretty cool. Two things I don't like. One of these things I'll talk about a lot later, but it's just kind of the game from a theme perspective. The game's theme is the Core Discovery, which is Lewis and Clark, and it's also digging into the Manifest Destiny. More specifically, a game set in the world of Manifest Destiny. Manifest Destiny is a comic book series in this context that basically takes Lewis and Clark and says, hey, what if instead of just exploring the West for the United States to try to figure out the new frontier, if you will, or something like that, what if there was like, you know, cryptids and Sasquatches and like, you know, bats and like you know, minotaurs that they had to fight off? And what if Lewis had like a secret book that he wrote with all these things going on, like the super secret society he's trying to fight against and all these other things? So it basically takes from that theme. And from the comic book series perspective, I feel like it contends with the concepts of what's happening regarding Manifest Destiny as a historical concept, as it actually exists in the United States, which is basically the divine birthright of the land for the people of America, which definitely, you know, Native Americans had a lot of issues with that, as one should. I'm saying all that to say that I don't think that the game does anything to interact with that concept. This is why I'm going to put that whole discussion at the end of the video. And the second thing I don't like about the game is I feel like sometimes the puzzle that you're presented with is a little bit dire, more dire than I think it should be. Maybe it's just I'm not that familiar with some of the mechanics. Maybe it's just I'm getting my sea legs here with how the game flows. I have identified a few rules that I played wrong, even in my playthroughs that I posted. And I'm trying to correct those as I go along, and it's making the game a little bit more sensible, making the game a little bit less chaotic, if you will. But I do still feel that there's some times where the challenge that you're being faced with versus what you have and how much time you have to do it, those things don't match. And that doesn't feel good, because sometimes it's like, well, there's no way I'm going to possibly do this unless I get super ultra lucky. And I guess you can get super ultra lucky, but at a certain point it's like, nope, there's just no way I'm going to achieve this goal. I'm going to take the consequences for no fault of my own, and that doesn't feel good sometimes. So what I'm trying to say is that it does feel like sometimes the game is overly punishing at times, when there's nothing that you could do to actually impact that or influence the punishment that you're about to face. And that can feel crummy sometimes, especially for a game that can sometimes take about an hour and a half to play, to where you're kind of getting towards the end and you just get punished because you've done all this other stuff, but you didn't do it fast enough. And that's I don't know. I can take it or leave it, but I see that as a con for myself. So pros, lots of variety. Second pro, really crunchy puzzle that is rewarding, that you get some reward for. Cons, the game doesn't really contend with the theme of Manifest Destiny. It doesn't like make me think about it, doesn't make me like do anything with that history of it. And the second con is that it feels like it can be overly punishing at times, and that can sometimes, you know, turn me off for the game. I mean, I still play it because I still do think it's fun, but it's just sometimes I don't want to be beat up, you know. All right, cool. So that's on the review side. Like I said, I'm putting that part up front. Normally I'll put that in the back after I explain some of the mechanics and talk about some more stuff, but I have plans for what I'm going to talk about towards the end. So if all you want to see was a review, I recommend the game. I think it's 8 out of 10. Feel free to click off the video if you would like to, because especially towards the end, I'm going to talk a lot more about my personal views about things and get into the political side of things a little bit. So how this game plays. This is this is Manifest Destiny. No, this is the core discovery. This is the training scenario that I have set up in front of us. And some things that you'll see here are that you'll see I have a board here tracking some of my gear, some of my supplies, my backpacks here, some waters here. I also have a track of cards here that are challenges, and these challenges are things that will, you know, I'll have to face each as I go through the game. So I have to kind of collect certain resources, do certain things, achieve certain things to kind of keep the game moving. And then over here in the middle, which I'll zoom in for this part, which I think it's on 2. Yeah, there you go. Over here on this part is our kind of our summary of what our goal is. So if you look on here, this says we're doing the training mission. Our goal is to survive 2 full days, and we ignore the night phase, or we ignore most of the night phase, just not all of it, just most of it. The peak is on D7, or sorry, D6, and that's telling us that we will put this little stone here to represent the peak. The rulebook explains that. And also we will start on column 7. So this is column 7 here. This is column 7 here. So I will get to start along any of those spots here for this particular scenario. And I'll also start with 3 water, which is why I have 3 water over here. And water is an important resource on this game. And it's also showing me a picture of all the mechanic, or all the things that I'll need to start with. And in addition to that, the rulebook under chapter 0, whoops, I almost hit the wrong button. Where's my? The rulebook under chapter 0 will talk about the training mission, and I'll bring this up here on the zoomed in screen. And it kind of has a text here, like some story text for you if you want to kind of get into the background of what's going on, and hey, you know, you're being sent out to go do the thing the president asked you to do. And it gives you the setup and also gives you some special rules for it. So I'm pointing this out because this is where it tells me to reveal any threat card with a Minotaur and place this matching token on D4. So you'll know that on my map, I've done that already, but I'm just letting you know that it explains here. It also tells me to get the reference board for the training and some other stuff. So just know that the rulebook explains the setup here for the training scenario, which is why we have things set up the way we have it set up here. So I will explain the game by playing through the first night, or first day, and I'll explain things as we go along. So this is not going to be entirely a comprehensive teach, so my apologies if you came for a comprehensive teach, but I will teach hopefully just enough for us to get some of the mechanics, and then I can kind of expand a little bit more on my review that I did earlier, expand a little bit more on things that I liked, things that I didn't like, and then finally talk about the whole subject matter, the elephant in the room, if you will. So going into the mechanics, I'm going to start on this column. So I'm going to choose to start here, sure, and I'm going to start by revealing this. Now, on my turn, I will be doing a few things. My turn structure looks like this. I will first explore a path, and then after I do that, I will have a list of free actions that I can do, and I can do as many of them as I want to. And then after I do that, then we will end our turn by checking to see if we have reached our challenge here, which in this case, our challenge is 5. So if we have 5 path tokens here, then we trigger the challenge, we evaluate the challenge, and we see if I passed or failed. If I pass, I get the things on the left. If I fail, I get the things on the right. And then we continue the phasing of the game. So essentially, I have 5 turns, well, 4 turns to find a piece of wood. And there's other challenges here, which I'll have some heads up that these are coming along. So we have a flood coming up. We have cold snap coming up, and let me zoom in so we can see that a little bit better. We have a flood coming up, as I mentioned before. So I'll need to eventually get myself a piece of wood, a rock, and have 2 more water to spend on that. And my reward is I lose 1 fire, which is not the greatest thing in the world, but is better than losing 2 water, gaining a sample, which blocks up some of my backpack space, and then I lose the fire, and I have to lose 2 other resources too. So I end up losing 4 resources and a fire, and gain a sample if I don't succeed. So I'd rather succeed if I can. So that's kind of the whole like reward, the penalties I'll face if I don't do those things. And a thing that's really critical to this flow of the game is this card here. So this card, sorry, move this out of the way. This card here is what we call our, well, I guess we call it the training mission card. I don't know the official name for it. Let me see. What does the rulebook call it? Is it our reference sheets? This is our, yeah, reference board. So this is our reference board for the training mission. A normal reference board, oops, just ignore that. A normal reference board will look more like this. As you can see, there's more stuff on it. So I'm gonna explain the normal reference board first, and then we'll go back to the training board. So the normal reference board will have this information. On the left-hand side, it has things that are specific to that particular side of the mission. So I'm just gonna slide this over so we don't focus on that too much. And we're gonna focus on everything else here. So up here in this section, this will explain things that are always true, as in it will always be true that a water is adjacent in the cardinal directions to a stick or to a piece of wood. And it's also always true that a food will be diagonal to a TP. And subsequently a TP will be diagonal to a food. It is always true that a vine is in the same column as a stone. So if you find a stone, then a vine will be in that column somewhere. Doesn't say exactly where, but it will be. And it's also always true that a TP will be next to a skull on any of the directions, including diagonals. And subsequently, a skull will be next to a TP in all the directions, including diagonals. So these are things that are always true. Now over here, these are things that are true condition or true in a certain direction. So in this case, there's always exactly 1 wood per row and column. So that's pretty straightforward. This one here is the directionality I was referring to. So if you find a mud, then you know that there will be adjacent to the mud in 2 different directions, a water and a stone. So a water and a stone will can signal that there will be a mud, not always, but if you do find a mud, then you know for sure that there will be a water and there will be a stone around it. So again, it's true in this direction. It's not always true in that direction. I just want to point that out. Over here, it says all stones are connected to each other, so they're adjacent to each other. And there's no stones on the edge of the board, and stones were impassable, so that's another thing that's always true. This one's always true that there's 4 different items, so there's going to be 4 different terrain types. These are called terrain types. All these are called terrain types. There's 4 different terrain types around a skull. So if you find a skull, then you know that there's 4 different terrains in all 4 directions adjacent to the skull. And then you get a destiny card, which is pretty nice. This one says if you find a shelter spot or a spot you can build a shelter in, which has this exact symbol, then you will find a food and a stick around it, and so on and so forth. So these are all rules that are true in certain directions, and that's an important thing to note. But we will be using the training card, which is much more simplified, much more basic. I wanted to explain it from the main board because it's a little bit more going on, and that can hopefully help people out with finding out what's going on. So for our training mission, we're only going to use these squares here, so a 5x5 grid that's in that particular spot right there, as you can see on the little picture, and in green there. And water is always orthogonally adjacent to a stick. A vine is always in the same column as a stone. There's only 1 wood per row and column. If you find a mud, then you know that there's a water and a stone that's that's adjacent to it in the cardinal directions. All the stones are connected. And then finally, if you find a hill, then the number that's on the hill will tell you how many water are in that row and column. So for instance, if we switch over to our main board, if we found a hill, so I'm just going to use this to represent a hill. If this were a hill, then we know that, and it had the hill and it had the number of 3. Actually, let's do this. If we had this be a hill, if this was a hill and it had the number 3, then we know in this column in this row, there are 3 water total. So in this case, there's 1 there we already know about. So there's 2 more water somewhere along this line. So we will use that to kind of do our logic. So I said I'm going to play through the first full day, so let's go ahead and start playing through our first full day. So I'm playing the character of Lewis. I have an ability as a free action. I can use that at any time. I can exhaust before exploring, and then I gain 2 resource or water of the thing that I find. And then I have a compass, exhaust before exploring. If I guess correctly the terrain that I'm about to explore, then I get to discard the path token, which means that the timer doesn't count. So, and my goal is to basically survive 2 days. I can alternatively also defeat the Minotaur. I don't have to, but I can. So that's another thing we can keep buying. Oh, also, last thing. The Minotaur, in its row or column, based on the effect of its card, which I'll bring up here for us to see, it says that its effect is discard any 1 resource or water to explore a path in its row or column. So as a result, if I explore a path in its row or column, then I have to throw away another resource before I can successfully do that. So that's a burden. That's going to be a waste of resources for me. So that's going to be annoying, but that's fine. I can choose to take them out by having a fire and then expending 1 stone, and then afterwards I discard this card. The rule for defeating Minotaurs is that if they're revealed, then I can just defeat them. I don't have to be next to them or walk to them or anything, so that's important. Okay, cool. Now that we're done with that, let's go ahead and finally start doing the rest of our first 3 days here, first 3 challenges, if you will. So I'm starting here, and I'm going to go and take my action. I'm just going to go and move up because I just want to move up. And I know because there's a water here, I know that there's a high chance that there's a stick here or a stick here. So I can actually use my tokens here. On the reverse side of the items that you would gain, there's a question mark that you can use to kind of help yourself with the puzzle, like that. So I think there's a stick here, and I think there's a stick here. I don't know if there's going to be a stick in both directions, but I think there's a stick there. So as a result, I'm going to go ahead and take advantage of my compass here. I'm going to spin my compass, and I'm going to say I'm guessing this is a stick. My compass says before I explore, I can exhaust this, and if I guess the terrain correctly, then the path token, which is the token that I get after I explore, can be discarded from the game as opposed to put here for the counter. So I'm going to hedge my bets. I'm hoping that this is going to be a stick. And, oh, it's not a stick, it's a mud. So therefore, it's a stick in the mud. Therefore, this path token goes there. I do not get a stick. I do get a mud, though, because that is the terrain type that I've interacted with. So I now have a mud. Cool. And I also feel silly. Okay. So now that we're done with that, we know for a fact this is a stick. So I could use my researcher ability to exhaust before I explore and gain 2 of that resource or water before I, after I flip it over. But I don't want 2 sticks. Actually, no, I take it back. I do want 2 sticks because I need a stick here and I need a stick there. So, all right, we're gonna exhaust that ability and we're gonna go here, and lo and behold, it's a stick. So I get a stick for the terrain type here. And then because of my ability, I gain 2 of the thing instead of 1. So I'm gonna get another stick there, and this path token goes there. And the rule for a mud is that there must be a water and a stone next to it. So I know that this is a stone or this is a stone. And because of the rules for stones, that they're not on the edge of the board, I know for a fact that this is also a stone. So that's me applying the logic there. So I will pick up this stone because why not? So it's going to pick it up, and it is in fact the stone. It goes right there, and this path token goes there. And then finally, for my exploring, this little red border just as a reminder that I cannot explore from this perspective, as in I cannot go from here to there because this giant red border says I can't explore from here, but I can explore from here to there if I wanted to. And as you guys can see, when you start exploring, you're actually exploring from the path that you've already tread. There's no walking, there's no action points, there's no moving back and forth, there's no spin to 2 turns to do the thing. They've abstracted how the walking works or how the traveling works in this game just by showing the path token that you've already explored, and you're just exploring from the edges of that. Some people like to compare this game to like a Minesweeper style game. Not me personally, but I guess I can see it. All right, so I'm gonna explore this one because I don't think it's gonna impact me much. I have no earthly idea what it could be. Actually, it could be a vine. But even if I knew what it was, it wouldn't matter. Oh, it's a water. Okay, cool, I'll take it. All right, And now that we're done with that, we have 5 path tokens here. So count them, 5 path tokens. So now it's time to evaluate this challenge. This challenge says I must spend a wood to get a resource, or sorry, I must spend a wood. So I will spend the wood. And now that I have spent the wood, I have passed, so I will get a food. And that is it. And then we throw this card away. Now I'm gonna zoom in so we can see this a little bit closer. But if you look at the back of under each of these cards, there's this consequence. So the consequence says, when revealed, I lose 1 water if fatigued and resolve any monster that has consequences. So fatigue is my backpack. If I have 5 or more items in my backpack, 5 or 6 items in my backpack, I will be considered fatigued. And if I am fatigued, I lose a water. So in this particular case, I do not have 5 or more. You see they're fatigued. I do not have 5 or more items in my backpack, so therefore I'm not fatigued. So that doesn't do anything, and I move on to my next turn. With my next challenge being I need to find a stick and a rock and 2 water. So I have the 2 water, I have the stick and the rock, so we are good. We are good to just kind of prepare for our next one, which our next one we need a fire. Which we can make a fire by having discarding 2 sticks or 2 stones, and that lets us build a fire. So I think we know this is a stone. Sorry, actually, this is a mud. No, this is not guaranteed to be a mud. Because remember, from the perspective of the mud, there's a rock and a water. There's a rock and a water here, so there's a chance this is a mud, but this could also be a stone. So I'm gonna try to get this one because I know it's a stone. Actually, no, I lied. I'm gonna try to get this one because I only have 3 turns to get the stuff. So this is gonna be turn 1, and it's a vine. That's not great. Oh, actually, it is great, because we know that a vine is in the same column as a stone, and that means that this is probably a stone. So maybe I'll be in okay shape. I don't know. Don't know yet. I got a vine. This is gonna go there. And the challenge is I'm not gonna be close enough to the stones. I'm trying to make a fire right now, but I don't think I'll be able to make the fire fast enough before the end of the challenge, or else I'll face fatigue, which is not great. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna push my luck. I'm gonna push my luck. No, I'm not gonna push my luck. I need another stick. So I'm gonna go here in the hopes that this is a stick. Now, because I'm in the path of the Minotaur, I will need to spend a resource. So I'm gonna spend this vine, and then I'm gonna reveal this, and it's another vine. Okay, all right, well, it's not a stick. It's not what I wanted it to be. All right, all right. This is becoming a little bit trickier now because I want to get rid of this resource because I don't need it. And I can theoretically also get rid of the mud. Yeah, I'll get rid of the mud too because I don't need it. So I'm going to explore this one knowing that it's not going to get me the game yet, or it's not going to get me the next fire that I need, but it will put me in position to get the fire and possibly another stone later. So I'm going to go ahead and take this one out. It's a mud, so that means that this is a water, which is good to know, because we know that's a stone, and maybe this is a stone, maybe this is a stone, I'm not sure. And because I explored that one, I had to spend a resource to do so, and there we go. So I also gain a mud. All right, and we're done with this. So now we're going to evaluate. We have a stone and a stick that goes there, and then we're going to spend 2 water. So we've succeeded in doing that. And you know what? In hindsight, I'm actually glad I didn't build the fire. I was really like focused on building that fire, but I would have lost the fire had I built it right now. So it's actually pretty okay that I did not build the fire. It doesn't put me in, you know, it doesn't put me in a good position still, because I still need to find 2 stones. But at the very least, I didn't lose a fire, and that didn't go to waste. All right, so we're not overburdened, we're not fatigued, I mean, so we're good. Now we're going on to this one. I'm gonna get this one, which we know is a stone. It costs me a resource because the centaur is there. Minotaur is there. All right. What are the chances that this is a stone? That's my question. I think it's a better chance that this is a stone than this is a stone. So I'm gonna search for this one, which is gonna cost me a mud. And cool, it's a stone. Perfect, that's what I wanted. Because I need to build a fire. Now, I haven't done a ton of free actions here so far, mainly because I've been just kind of moving along with the path, but free actions include a number of things that I can do. One of those free actions that I can do is I can build a fire, as listed here on my card. So I'm gonna go ahead and spin 2 stones to build a fire. And that gives me this little fire symbol over here, and I've successfully built a fire. And that's a free action. So I could do more free actions if I had them. I guess I activate a card just free actions, but overall we're okay. So now if I get 1 more stone, then I can use the stone and the fire to take out the centaur. Sorry, I keep calling it centaur, the minotaur. But I'm not going to do that at the moment. So I'm just going to go here because I do want some more water. That's going to give me the water that we knew was there. And now we're done. We're at 3. So we're going to evaluate this card. We have a fire, and we're going to spin 2 water, and we are okay. Now, the reward is we're going to gain a sample. Now, samples are very specifically there to muck up your backpack. It's really annoying, but they exist. Sometimes as rewards and sometimes as consequences, you get samples. And the way you can get rid of a sample is by, if you look on the back of this, I can get rid of a sample by discarding a water or another resource. Is that or another resource? Let me double check. I thought it was just a water. I'm checking the rulebook because I could have sworn it was just discard a water, specifically a water to get rid of a sample. So let me just read it here. Sample tokens. Some challenge cards will tell you to gain a sample. This token is placed in your backpack and takes up 1 space. That's a free action. You can discard 1 resource or water. Okay. To discard the sample token. Good to know. But at any rate, we're done with that. So now we're done with that. Now we go to the end of day. End of day, we got to eat a food. We're going to eat a food. And then we do the night phase. So the rules say skip the night phase or ignore the night phase. But one of the things that happens in the night phase is you refresh your character cards. So I'm not going to ignore that part, but I'll ignore everything else about it. That's fine. And then after that, we get 3 new challenge cards to represent the next day. And I didn't talk about the losing conditions, so I'll talk about those now. The losing conditions in this game are that if you need to spend water, if I need to spend water for something and I have not enough water, then I die and we lose the game immediately. If I need to eat food at the end of the day and I do not have a food, then I die. We lose the game ends immediately. And there's also some other scenarios where the game can end earlier depending on which chapter you're playing, which expansion you're playing with, I should say. So for instance, in the fauna world things, I had to take out the minotaurs. Essentially, the losing conditions are just, you know, running out of challenges, which is universal for everything else. So if all the challenges are out of the deck, because you will start with a certain number of challenges here, if all the challenges are gone and you have to fill in your challenge slots, but you don't have enough challenge cards, and you lose immediately. If the food situation is there and you don't have a food to eat, you lose immediately. If you run out of water, you lose immediately. So that's for the fauna. Yes, that's for the fauna section. For the flora section, which is chapter 2, so chapter 1 is fauna, chapter 2 is flora. For the flora section, there's also additional losing conditions, as in if you lose all your crew members, which that makes sense. If you actually sit down and play that one, then you can lose the game. If you do not successfully defeat the plant monster that you have to fight in the 2nd chapter, then you lose the game. So on and so forth. So there's varying losing conditions is what I'm saying, but there's some universal ones, such as not being able to eat food, running out of the resource that you need, which more specifically water, and all those other things. So that is a general idea of how the game flows. This is only the training mission. And I will also say that if you are playing this game and you are learning this game, it is very important to note that when you do play a new chapter, when you do play with a new expansion, do definitely read the setup steps for the specific chapter. The base game is a little bit confusing, and this actually bleeds into some of the discussion here of the game. The base game is a little bit confusing for me initially because they have some rules here in the initial part of the rulebook. So you have your setup. This is for the core game setup. It tells you everything you need for that, and that's fine. It has all the phrases here, has everything that you would need here on this page, as it should be. So I appreciate that they put that. They numbered things, they put letters, and it's very easy to follow and easy to do. But the other part is that for each different chapter, you will need to check out the chapter section for the additional setup. So for the setup for the tutorial mission or the training mission, you need to do these steps. And subsequently, if you're doing chapter 1 fauna, you need these chapter-specific components. So these specific ones, in addition to the core setup that you saw over here on the earlier part of the rule book. Oops. Right there. So you need this setup plus these extra things, and it'll tell you exactly what to put, where to put it, and how to put it, and how things will flow. And if you go to the next chapter, the Flora chapter, it'll tell you that this one has specific chapter setup components in addition to the core setup. So the main thing is that as long as you do the core setup, then you do the chapter specific stuff, then it'll make sense as far as what goes where and how things interact, because this will explain it. And if I bring out, sorry, my hair's in there. If I bring out the rulebook for one of the expansions, let's do Insecta. This is the first expansion. You'll see here that it has chapter specific changes to gameplay, it has chapter specific components, and it tells you everything you need to know here in these books. So I'm pointing that out because when I was first learning how to play the game, I decided to learn how to play straight from the rulebook. I didn't really watch any tutorial videos or anything because I said, you know what, that didn't seem that complicated, let me try it out. So, you know, it took me about a day to kind of get through the entire thing, and I did live stream that, but it's not going to be on YouTube though, so no official documented record, but I did live stream it. And it took me a while to understand that the chapter sections weren't optional. As in, the way I read it was that this is a campaign to unlock the different components. I just want to play the full game. Just let me play the full game. So board games like Revive have done that in the past, to where they unlock certain aspects of the game behind chapters or different story scenarios. Even a game like Space Base did that too. So I was like, I just want to play the game. Like, I don't want to do all this chapter stuff. I don't have time to play through a campaign just to learn how to play the game. But the way that the way that I thought it was worded made it to where I didn't fully understand that this is actually telling you how to set up things for that particular version of the game, as in the flora version of the game, the fauna version of the game, the insecta version of the game, so on and so forth. So that's important to note. So don't make that mistake, or just find a YouTuber or find some tutorial video that explains everything for you. The other parts of the setup and everything is that, yeah, the game I mentioned before that it can seem a little bit brutal. Brutal is the appropriate word there, and that brutality really comes from the fact that some of the I don't know, some of the combinations of things that you can end up in just spell that you're going to be doomed forever, and that doesn't feel good. That doesn't feel good. I mean, I'm all for a challenging game, but sometimes it's like a combination of things just don't work out for you. Like for instance, and I just want to clarify, I'm supposed to be using these ones here. Yeah, I see. Okay, that makes more sense. All right, sorry. I'm supposed to be using these challenges here, not those ones. I forgot to switch the cards out, so my apologies. For those who watch the video, you should be using the challenge with the challenges with the little boat on them. That was my mistake. I'm not going to redo that part because everything else is fine. But the main thing I'm trying to point out is that sometimes you have combinations that just end up in a disastrous situation for you. You just have things that are just gonna, take you out, and you're just not gonna have a great time. It's not gonna be fun. It's not gonna feel fair, and sometimes it's not fair. Sometimes life is like that. It's not fair, But even in those situations, you just really can't do anything about it except for maybe dust yourself off and try again. And the game does lend itself a little bit to easy setup. And what I mean by that is that, you can kind of just put the pieces back. This is a tedious moment where you're trying to put the pieces back in to fill in the board. And then you also have to wipe your memory, if you will, of trying to not remember exactly what you saw or exactly where things were. And that's not possible. It's not possible. You can't unremember things that you just got through dealing with. So the saving grace for that, though, is a simple fact that you have the ability to just switch the map out. And even with the base game, they give you 20 maps, 10 in fauna, 10 in flora, and that's a lot of maps. So 20 maps to play through. This is, sorry, not including this, technically 22 if you count the 2 training mission sides, because there's training mission side A and training mission side B. So you have 22 maps that you can play through, and that's really nice to kind of help you forget some of the things that you saw, or some of the things that you knew. And the other part about it is that each expansion has 10 maps, 5 sheets that are double-sided, and those 10 maps give you a lot of variety for playing out those scenarios or playing with those rules and playing with that logic puzzle, and that's pretty cool. And on top of that, there's also additional map packs that have been released by Off-Page Games, and or off the page games, and those maps are essentially just more stuff following the same rules. So I have all of the extra maps except for the fourth. So there's four core expansions, and then there's map packs. And I have I have 3 of the 4 expansions. I do not have the fog expansion, which is the 4th one. I don't know if it's not out yet, if it's out of print. Maybe it's not out yet, I don't know. I just couldn't find it at any store that I was trying to shop at, in my friendly local game store. And they're usually pretty good about getting all of the game. But you know, it happens. But I was not able to get all the expansions, unfortunately. But even with all the stuff, because I did have the printout stuff and I printed those out, they give you, or I have a grand total of 20 in the base game, 10 per expansion, so that's 60 different maps already. And then there's, of all the extra map packs, they did a bonus, or they did an extra map pack for all 4 core expansions, plus the 2 base game maps. So if I'm adding those together, that's going to give me, what is that? Sorry, I'm doing math, I'm trying to do math live. That's 60 more, so that's going to be 120 maps just between the base game, the expansions, and the map pack 1 for all of the base game plus expansion stuff. And then they have an extended map pack, which has more maps, I think 24 more maps for everything. And it goes I think it's 4 for each expansion plus the base game stuff. So that makes sense. 24 divided by 6 is going to be 4. Yep, okay, cool. So 4 maps for each one. So what is that, 120 plus 24, that's 144. And then there's another map pack that adds, I think, another 10 maps. So that's 154. Math is hard. Is that right? 154? Yeah, 154. And then there's another map pack that adds, I think, 10 more maps. So basically what I'm saying is that there's a ton of maps. And yes, these maps are not all, maybe not all of your favorite ones. So if you really like Flora, but you hated Fauna, then the map packs I'm referring to, they do include maps for both Flora and Fauna. So maybe you won't get more of the game that you want, but I like the fact that there's so much that they've put into the game, so much that they made available for the game from the publishers themselves, from the developers themselves. So that's really nice. So it gives you a lot of variety. It gives a lot of legs to the game. And that's one of the things that I like. I mentioned before, there's a lot of variety. I think I mentioned before, there's a lot of variety in the game. If I didn't, I'll mention it now. There's a lot of variety in the game. And there's always something to do. And the maps, yes, they're all following the same logic puzzle, but it'll be a different logic puzzle each time. And it's kind of like having Sudoku being your favorite game. It's kind of like having a book of Sudoku puzzles. And yes, you can play through them, and you might be able to play through all 100 in the book. Theoretically, though, if you just got a brand new book and played through the same 100, you wouldn't be able to exactly remember what things were. And that's how this game works. As in, yes, as I'm going through, I might remember that, okay, this particular path got me to the thing I needed. If I play another map and then I come back to this map right afterwards, or after I finish that playthrough, that hour-long playthrough, I will have probably forgotten where things were, and I wouldn't remember super clearly where things were. And that's even more emphasized, if you will, if I just play more maps, and just play other maps. So again, 10 maps in the base game for each chapter, so 20 maps total. There's a lot to kind of sink your teeth into, even with just the base game, even without getting the expansions, even without getting the bonus map packs. But if you do want to dive deep into those, like we're talking 150 plus maps, I feel like that's really good. You know, it's really good from the variety perspective. Okay, cool. I'm glad we talked about that. There's also another thing to note, because each chapter introduces kind of new mechanics, it has a different play style added to it. I will say that, speaking from my experience from playing Fauna and Flora, those are the only 2 that I played, it was very different. It was very different. In Fauna, you're essentially running around trying to take out the Minotaurs that show up. So you're trying to find these forts, and these forts will give you instructions on how to take out the Minotaurs. And then once you use that particular way, that particular instruction on how to take out the Minotaur, then that particular fort attack card goes away. So you have to go to a different fort. So you have to explore and find a different fort, and that fort will tell you a different way to take out a Minotaur. And then you meet those requirements to take out the Minotaur, and you basically have to take out 3 Minotaurs for all the Fauna maps. And it feels nice because you kind of have that exploration, like walking around, trying to get the forts, trying to collect the items you need, and then taking out the Minotaurs. And then you're also trying to contend with the fact that there's other misfortunes that are happening, other negative things that are happening. You got challenges that are just giving you the hardest of times. And it just feels nice. It feels good for the balance in things. So I liked Fauna. And on Flora Flora gives you a completely different look. So instead of going through and just randomly exploring or logically exploring and trying to find the items that you need to take out a thing, in this one you have a specific path that you need to follow, and that path is a order, I should say. So you have your map like normal, and you're still walking around like normal, but you have this sequence of locations that you need to have your crew travel. So they have to travel them in this specific order. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to use your deductive reasoning to try to find, okay, hey, I need to make sure that my next thing I reveal is a skull, but now I got to figure out, okay, where are skulls most likely? And then you want to try to walk over there as efficiently as you can to get to the skull you need so you can move along the path. And you basically have to go through 10 different specific locations. Terrains is what the game calls them, the little circles here. So this is called a terrain spot. This is also called a terrain spot. So you have to go through a certain sequence of those before you can get to the final boss. And then when you get to the final boss, you have to have a certain set of resources before you can take them out. And it feels very different from the other one. So I'm really excited and trying to explore the expansions to see how they change up the gameplay, how they add stuff, how they might take away stuff, how they might just give you a whole different look. And I don't want to say I'm impressed by the fact that they're doing so much with so little, because I feel like other games like 20 Strong have earned that mantle of doing so much things with such few things. But in this game, they do take what they have in the box and they do give you a lot of different looks, and I appreciate that greatly. So more kudos, more positive things towards the game. Okay, cool. So that is kind of me talking about some of the chapter mechanics, some of the different mechanics that go from gameplay to gameplay, and just giving you an idea of how much variety that I've seen so far in my playthrough, and how much more variety I expect as I play through the game. We'll see if that holds as I play more of the game, but yeah, there's that. Okay, now we're done with that. So I mentioned at the top of the video that there was a very important thing that I wanted to talk about. I originally wanted to have this at the beginning of the video, but I understand that some people, when they get into the board game world, they hear somebody talking about things that sound like related to history or sound like they're related to, like, you know, society and stuff like that, and they just kind of tap out completely. So I wanted to save this section for the last part. Like I said, I really truly wanted to put this up front, but I put it at the end because I want to be respectful of people's time. So if you're still listening, thank you for still listening. And I will go ahead and finally dive into the theme of the game. So the theme of this game is about Manifest Destiny. And for those who don't know what Manifest Destiny is, at least from the United States perspective, let me just go ahead and look up the Wikipedia, because that's a concise enough definition of what's going on. Manifest Destiny is the idea of basically imperialism for the United States, for America, if you will. And the Wikipedia line reads that Manifest Destiny was an imperialist belief in the 19th century United States that American settlers were destined to expand westward across North America, and this in that this belief was both obvious and certain. So it was both obvious, manifest, and certain, destiny. And a lot of the reasons why I'm bringing it up is because Manifest Destiny as a concept was very how's I supposed to say it? You can't just walk into somebody's house and start manifest destinying, you know? If you walk into somebody's house that you don't know and you start saying that this is my bed, this is my kitchen, this is my bathroom, that person says, what do you mean? Get out of my house. This is my house. And then, you know, you might have a squabble back and forth, but of course the person has a right to the place. So I'm saying that because Manifest Destiny and imperialism and the concept of starting colonizing the West, United States has a lot of very deep and dark parts, and it's a very important part of American history, but it's also part of American history I think that needs to be handled with care. And the board game's theme here is based on a comic book series called Manifest Destiny, and the comic book series called Manifest Destiny features the adventures of the characters Lois and Clark, the famed adventures that a lot of people know. And it follows them and says, hey, what if instead of doing what they normally did, there was like some cryptids and Sasquatches and monsters and minotaurs and you know, plants that devour people that they had to fight and contend with. And it basically takes that while also trying to respect and trying to be realistic, if you will, with the history of what Manifest Destiny was, what Lewis and Clark were actually doing, which was basically trying to find the most efficient way to exploit the land in the West, trying to find the most efficient way or the best places for us to take away from the Native Americans that lived in there, the indigenous people that lived there, and trying to find different ways to just map out what the world looked like on the West, and look at all this land that belongs to us. Us, the in this case, the colonizers, or the colonial peoples, in this case, mostly rich white men, in American history. And yeah, this is our land. And the indigenous people said, no, it's not. And then the colonizers said, yes, it is. And they, murdered, stole, traded, all the things that they needed to do to take over the land. So very, very violent, not very great, and also not the greatest moment in American history. I will say that there are much darker things in American history for sure, but that is a preference that I wanted to say. Like, I wanted to lay the foundation for that by saying that this game does nothing with the theme outside of use the characters and use the artwork from the book, from the comic books. And it's a little disappointing. And like I said, I originally want to put this at the beginning of the video, but I understand that I'm kind of ranting and rambling at this point, so some people might have tapped out already. Again, thank you so much if you're still watching and listening. Hopefully what I'm saying is going to make a little bit of sense. But taking the subject matter of Manifest Destiny and just kind of doing what this game is doing doesn't really add to the conversation. And that is not to say that this board game has to add to the conversation. That is also not to say that the designers of the board game, which are both, man, they're listed on the box here. The designers of the board game, Jay Comier and Sing Fong Lim, is not to say that they didn't go through a lot of hard steps to try to make sure that they're actually treating the subject matter properly, because they did reach out to professionals, they did reach out to experts, they did reach out to historians, they did reach out to indigenous persons, and they also did reach out to sensitivity consultants to try to talk about the concept and try to make sure that they were treating the subject matter with the appropriate care required to take a game that has a theme or invokes a theme of Manifest Destiny, and actually make sure that they're not being offensive to Native persons, make sure they're not being offensive to some of the descendants of the colonizers that colonize. Because history is not very clean cut and dry, but you can end up in situations to where if you just treat the theme with a butcher's knife, it can just get into a bad spot. So that goes a long way to say that the mechanics don't do anything to extend the conversation, and that's very frustrating for me personally. I enjoy games like John Company. I enjoy games like PAX Emancipation. I enjoy games like Freedom and the Underground Railroad. And these are games that kind of take a theme that is very not great, very specific, if you will, and they treat those themes with care. So in John Company is a great example. It's one of my favorite examples because it takes the concept of the East Indian Trade Company and it says, hey, you are the rich families and you are exploiting the lands of India, and it puts you in those shoes and it makes you kind of, it lets you do the things that John Company did and play the game, but also makes you think about what is it that you're doing. What is it that you're doing when you go to war with India and you set up a governorship in India and you start taking over the land in India and send that money back home? What are you doing to the Indian people? Like the Indian people start revolting, the people who live in that land, the indigenous persons there, they'll start fighting back. And you as John Company, as a person in John Company, as an active participant in John Company, find yourself making decisions like, hey, we need to send more military to go fight them and stop the rebellion. Or, hey, we need to go and expand our empire north. Or we need to go expand our empire south. And you just have this system in John Company specifically that treats the subject matter with care from the perspective that it makes you critically reason with what you're doing. The game doesn't outright say that, hey, you gotta care, you gotta think about it, or hey, you're the monster. But what the game in John Company does specifically is it gives you the framework to exist in the way that the people who are running John Company most likely would have existed, or most likely did exist, where they're making decisions about how much money to send, they're making decisions about how to vote, they're making decisions about which boats to send over there, they're making decisions about where to put the fleet, they're making decisions about which land to invade, they're making decisions that are all basically leading to the imperial, or the imperial ambitions, if you will, of the people who ran John Company and, capitalism. Hey, you're a capitalist and your family's making a lot of money. I'm happy for you, but look at India. It's in shambles now. Congratulations, you played yourself. So that goes a long way to say that John Company invokes those thoughts, and it does those things through the mechanics of the game. Freedom, I'm not gonna speak about that one as much, but basically you're playing as a conductor on the Underground Railroad, which is not an actual literal railroad, but you're a system, a network of helping people escape from enslavement over into free lands to where the enslaved persons can be free. And in that game, it's making you kind of contend with the theme of like, what was it like to be a conductor? You're trying to lay low, you're trying to make sure your resources and your money's flowing, so that way you can actually afford to keep things open. You can actually pay off or bribe people that you might need to bribe. You can actually get people to where you need to get them, and you're also trying to track where the slave catchers are. You're trying to make sure that you divert the slaves that you're trying to free away from that, or the enslaved persons away from that, and you're trying to keep the slave catchers at bay. You're trying to play political cards to kind of change the way that things are working and slow things down. Sometimes things speed up. And in that game, it uses the mechanics to convey the message of what it was like to be a conductor, or what it may have been like to be a conductor on the Underground Railroad, based on literature that existed, based on first-hand accounts, based on second-hand accounts, based on historical analysis. And it does that through the mechanics. And I'm saying all this for John Company and for Freedom because both of those games take a subject that is very controversial and some people just feel very uncomfortable talking about. And it takes those subjects and actually does something with the mechanics. And actually, I just thought of a third game that I'll throw in there. I know I mentioned Pax Emancipation, but I'll put that one to the side. I'll use Twilight Struggle as the third example. Twilight Struggle essentially does that same thing, where it takes the concept of the Cold War between the United States and the USSR, the Allied countries in the USSR, basically, but basically US and USSR, from the perspective of Twilight Struggle, and it basically makes you make those decisions. Like, yes, you can play this card that does a good thing for you, but it'll also do a good thing for your enemy, and vice versa. Your enemy can play a card that will do good things for them, but also give you beneficial things. So the question is, like, how do you time it in this very precarious situation to where you're trying to make sure that you're not having, you know, total nuclear war, but you're also trying to advance your influence in the locations that you need to. You're also trying to fight back on the influence that your opponent, in this case the USSR or the US, depending on which side you're playing, is throwing on the board. And you're also trying to wait it out. You're trying to play events, you're trying to do things, and it really puts you into the shoes of what it felt like to make those really hard and difficult and nearly impossible decisions during the Cold War to make sure that you didn't end up in a total nuclear fallout. So Twilight Struggle, through its mechanics, takes the history of what the Cold War was like and what it was about, and it basically makes you contend with the reality of what those things were. And again, 3 games, John Company, Freedom, Twilight Struggle, they take the history that they're playing with and they use their mechanics to tell the story, to put you in the shoes of telling a story. And this game does none of those things. And that's what I mean by the theme of this game does nothing to advance the concept of manifest destiny. It does nothing to make you think critically about it. It does nothing to make you reason about it. It does nothing to make you even think much about it. All you're playing is just a nice kind of exploration game, and there's nothing about this game that screams, hey, are you thinking about the morality of manifest destiny? Or hey, are you thinking about how much money you can make? Or hey, are you thinking about how fighting back, or what fighting back on manifest destiny looked like? No, it's just, hey, there's a Sasquatch over here and you can go find him. And it's like, okay, cool, thanks game. So, a very long rambling rant, but I'm trying to explain where I'm coming from and why I'm saying this, why I'm giving this which I would call a big con. I mentioned before, a big negative for the game, is that it does nothing with the theme. It does nothing to advance the theme. It does nothing to interact with the theme, and that's really frustrating because I'm a huge fan of having board games like Twilight Struggle, like Freedom, like John Company, like Pax Emancipation, and even games like the People Power, which is about the people power movement in the Philippines, if I'm not mistaken, where the conservatives, the populist conservatives, stood up against the very oppressive governments, and also the third faction, the military, or even Fire in the Lake, a game about Vietnam. And these games have a lot of history, they have a lot of meaning, but they use their mechanics to tell the story of what's happening and to put you in the shoes of what's happening, to make you think and make you kind of reason with what's happening. And again, this game does 0 things about it. There's plenty of board games that exist that use a certain theme as just a coat of paint, and this is one of them. And that is, again, frustrating. So, does it make the game bad? No, it does not make the game bad. Does it mean that the designers are bad? No, it doesn't mean the designers are bad, doesn't mean that the illustrators are bad, doesn't mean the creators are bad, does not mean that the comic book writers from the original series are bad. All it really means is that I'm just frustrated that this game didn't do more with the theme. And I know the reason why, and I'll bring this up as my last point here so I can kind of step off my soapbox here. But there's a, oh, I closed it already. Shoot, all right, I gotta find it again. There's a writing that was done by the people who made Manifest Destiny, and I'll find it here in a second. Not Manifest Destiny, sorry, Core Discovery, and There it is. It's called What Is in a Name? And I'm going to read out one specific section in this because I think it's very important. This is basically the people who made this board game, the designers who made this board game, both, I want to name them properly, Jay Comier and Sin Fong Lim. They basically went in and they explained that, hey, this is what we were continuing with. This is what we did to try to make sure that the history was cool and clear. We try to make sure we consulted the right people. This is what they wrote, and this is a paragraph from one of the writings, and I'll link it in the description if you really want to read the whole thing. But here's an excerpt. This is just the third paragraph here. I guess fourth paragraph. It says here, when Jay and I as in I is Sin Fong Lim, when Jay Comier and I were first working on what has now become core discovery, we didn't have a world to set it in. We had this really interesting mechanism focused on exploration and deductive logic. Two things we both adore. With Jay's imprint, Off the Page Games, which is the publishing company for the game, having success with other comic book based titles such as Mind Management and Harrow County, we went looking for a suitable comic to expand into a full board gaming experience. We wanted a rich world with compelling characters and a storyline that is focused on exploration and survival. We found that in Manifest Destiny. Manifest Destiny being the name of the comic book series that this is using the artwork and the characters and all the theming from. So the reason I wanted to read out that specific paragraph is because that specific paragraph tells me all I need to know, which is, yes, these mechanics existed, they just didn't have a theme to put on it. And while playing this game, I felt like it didn't do anything to talk about or interact with the theme. It literally just says, oh, this is set in the core discovery. You're Lewis and Clark, and you're gonna go have fun. And it's like, okay, are you gonna do anything specific? It's like, you know, what's happening? It's like, oh, it's just a really cool exploration mechanic that I like a lot. But it's not doing anything like a Twilight Struggle would. It's not doing anything like a John Company would. It's not doing anything like a game like Freedom would, which takes some controversial history and it kind of uses it to influence the mechanics. And the mechanics will tell the story, and the story will help you learn what you're doing. And even a game like Hegemony, that's another example. A board game like Hegemony, I'm not gonna explain everything that happens in that game, but the interaction of you playing the middle class versus the working class versus the capitalist versus the state, there's 4 different players, and everybody's interaction is explained by the story of what those things mean in real life, and the board game translates those mechanically. And I appreciate those things greatly. And again, this game does none of that. And it's apparent that it did none of that. And then after reading that particular section in the writing, which the writing was more specifically an open letter that it did, it's called What's in a Name? Moving Beyond Manifest Destiny. This is their letter to explain, you know, hey, I get it. Some people are very offended by the concept of us using Manifest Destiny as a theme, but here's how here's the work that we've done to try and work through that. So in that open letter, they basically just outright said it, and I appreciate the honesty, which is we had a mechanic, we just didn't have a theme, so we applied this theme, and it's like, oh shoot, I didn't really consider, sorry, let me take it back. They did consider what the theme meant. I want to clarify. It's just the mechanics were not influenced by the theme, and the theme didn't advance the mechanics. It's just here. They could have easily just made this like a getting microplastics out of the water theme, and it would have been just fine. They could have just as easily used, you know, going in the desert and digging up fossils or something, and it would have been just as fine, you know? So that's why I'm like very frustrated, because you can literally take any theme and slap it onto this, anything for exploration and slap it onto this, and it'll be just fine. But they went with this theme of Manifest Destiny, the comic book series Manifest Destiny, which is about the historical concept of Manifest Destiny, just kind of the Weird West style, and they didn't do anything with it. And I was like, oh, this is such a missed opportunity, such a missed opportunity, and like, it's so frustrating. Okay, all right, I've ranted and rambled on long enough. As you can see, this is why I want to say this to the end, because I just want people to see the review and understand how the mechanics worked. If you have stuck along and heard and listened to me ramble and rant all along, please let me know some of your thoughts here in the comments. I know that some people feel 0 ways about it. It's like, bro, it's just a history thing. Why are you making such a big deal about it? I understand that. Like I said, for me, I would want a little bit more engagement with the theme, so that's why I'm saying all this. Again, I use my key examples of games like Hegemony, games like Twilight Struggle, games like John Company, games like Freedom, and a few other games, PAX Emancipation, even Dead of Winter, but I can't really use that one. That's not a historical thing. But these games just give you something to chew on. And this game doesn't give you anything to chew on except for some really, really compelling mechanics that I like a lot. I'm a huge fan of them. I'm looking forward to introducing this game to my friends. I am by no means saying that this is a bad game because of it, but if this game, I think I mentioned my ranking earlier of 8 out of 10, if this game actually did something with the concept, with the theme, this game could easily get in a whole nother point and get to a 9 out of 10, which the objective difference between an 8 out of 10 and a 9 out of 10 in my mind is not that much, but I'm just letting you know how much of a miss that it is to me that there's nothing really done with the theme of this. Now, the board game did inspire me to go research more about the comic book Manifest Destiny, and I'm very pleased to hear the different summaries that I've seen and just the fan base behind the Manifest Destiny comics and the work that the writers of the Manifest Destiny comics have put into that. So I think it's a Skybound Comics is the owner of the series of the franchise. Don't quote me on that. It's nice to see the support that they put into it and the love that they put into it and the care that they put into it. And also it's really cool to hear how the comic book treats the concept of Manifest Destiny and actually explores those things and talks about the darkness, it talks about the lightness, it talks about the ultimate good that came out of it. Although some people call it as glorifying kind of the spreading of American society, if you will. And just to clarify, when I put American in air quotes, I'm saying the white colonizer, white American colonizer specifically, logic and things. So take that however you will. I'm just saying this is just the interpretation that people will get from the thing. For me personally, I'm able to at least separate the kind of the work from the art. Sorry, the work from the art. The design, I guess, from the mechanics. I don't know. However I'm trying to say that. Basically what I'm saying is that it's not offensive enough for me to avoid the game completely, but I can definitely see it being a huge turnoff for some of my friends in my friend group that we play board games and we love to have political conversations and we love to talk about what the game made us think and what it invoked. And I think that this game is not invoking anything outside of, hey, this is a fun time doing some exploration. And I agree. This is a fun time doing some exploration. Kudos. But such a missed opportunity. I mean, you're talking about Manifest Destiny. Come on. Okay. All right. I think I've rambled on enough. I'm going to go ahead and close out there. So for those who are watching here on YouTube or on Twitch, for those who are watching YouTube, I do live stream on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/CulBlu. That's CulBlu. So feel free to check me out there, which I'll be there. For those who are watching me right now live on Twitch, thank you all for watching. I will be playing another game. I don't know if I'm going to play 20 Strong or if I'm going to play this again. I think I want to play this again because I do enjoy this game a lot. I think I'll play through another game of this. I'll pause for food and then I'll play another game of this. But for those who are watching YouTube, thank you all very much for watching. Hope you all enjoyed it. And as always, I will see you all whenever.